Hello and welcome to the Box Score Network on YouTube. My name is Simon. I'm here with Ben. We're here wrapping up our Coaching Carousel Series. It's now officially Thursday, January 30th, Ben. Senior Bowl is happening, and the Saints do not have a head coach. Who do you think they got out there? Is Mickey Loomis out there with a clipboard watching stuff for the Saints? You think he's got a whistle around his neck? I didn't even write down the Saints in our little sheet here, but I don't know. Should we actually start with the Saints or should we save them for the end?
Let's go ahead and start with the Saints, man. Let's open up the can.
So here's the thing for the Saints. All right. It feels like what was happening was, and we said this from the beginning, Joe Brady or Aaron Glenn, some guys they're familiar with, but also hot coordinator names that are coming up. Um, Aaron Glenn gets hired by the Jets. Joe Brady declines a second interview, essentially. I think he might have agreed to one, but he pulls himself from consideration before a second interview can happen. He's staying in Buffalo. And now the Saints are scrambling, right? Mike McCarthy was the next guy that kind of felt like he was emerging once he was let go by the Cowboys. He pulls himself out of consideration for the role. And so guys that they've had legitimate second interviews with that are still out there. Mike Kafka, OC for the Giants, Anthony Weaver, DC for the Dolphins, who sounds like had a really good interview with them, and Kellen Moore, who's currently the front runner. It was actually Schefter actually put out today like he's the front runner. They're really eyeing him, which really feels like language of after the Super Bowl they're going to announce this kind of deal or as soon as they can. So they'll drop it the day before the Super Bowl and ruin everything for the Eagles. But Kellen Moore seeming like he's going to be head coach of the Saints. But what have you thought about this whole process for New Orleans? What do you think it means about the job that people are pulling out of the position? I mean, veteran guys like McCarthy, guys who have been there like Joe Brady. What do you think all this means for New Orleans?
It's not good, and I've not hidden the fact that for 4 years now I've criticized the Saints, but a lot of that really has been more about how they run their salary cap and the results that they're getting out of it. So that's really the gist of it. But we've referred to them as the family, kind of the mafia style setup down there. They're not inept, they're not uncompetitive, but still, it hasn't been good down there. I think they need to hit the reset button. You and I agreed that this was not a great coaching spot. It wasn't the most attractive. But I didn't really truly realize that guys really didn't want to go there. And I don't know if that's because of the personnel there or the cap situation or old quarterback, maybe all three. But when you have guys that are legit, two guys pulling out, saying we don't even want to come down there and talk to you, that's a real indicator that it's a problem. And then you have Aaron Glenn just kind of snatched right out from under you too. We already knew they weren't going to get the top guys, but now they're not even getting the mid-tier guys. So that's a real problem. I didn't realize that it was quite as unattractive as guys seem to think it is.
Yeah, either it is the salary cap situation where these head coaches are looking at it and they're like, there's like a 2 year window where I need to win big or else they're gonna clear the roster and clear the coaching staff. Dennis Allen had a long leash, but that's because he started this thing 4 years ago or whatever it was. So it's kind of like a ticking time bomb with the Saints roster that a coach is like, I'd rather not be stuck holding this roster when or holding this job when the roster blows up. Or it is the fact that, you look around the league and these coaches, man, they want to bring their own GMs everywhere. I mean, Ben Johnson wants to, and he eventually settles on Ryan Poles, but like that was a big thing for him, right? Okay, who's gonna be his GM? Liam Cohen gets Balky fired. We'll talk about that, but he wants to not only Balky being fired, but the Jags tell him he gets to pick the GM, essentially, right? These coaches want to pick their GM, and the Saints don't have a GM. They have Mickey Loomis, who is technically he's now technically like vice president of operations or whatever, but he's not a real football GM guy. I mean, he has the same role with the Pelicans, for goodness sakes. Like he manages the money, he makes the money work, he makes the contracts work, and a coach might walk in and say, okay, well, this guy does this, but like, and that's great. Like maybe it means I get more say in football, but like, who's running my scouting department? Who's in charge of player person? Oh, that's you. I don't want to do all that. That's crazy. Can I bring a GM? No, we run it like this. All right, I'm out. So yeah, when Mike McCarthy was looking for his third team in 6 years, and Joe Brady, who got fired by the Panthers and was in college 4 years ago, when they're the guys that are like, yeah, we're all right. We'll just wait and see what happens next year. Yeah, not a
Yeah.
good place to be. But hey, this good for Kellen Moore. If this is the thing, good offensive play designer, calling good plays right now for Philadelphia. He's going to be in the Super Bowl. Um, there is talent on the roster. So, and if this is the fact that he couldn't get the Cowboys job, man, I mean, if this might be the last real chance that a guy like Moore gets. So, we won't do a lot of speculating on what we think Moore for this team would be, but I think we both think Moore's a good OC. So if this is kind of where they're at, at least this is a guy that's been in head coaching conversations for 3, 4 years now. Um, this might end up being a good fit, and he's got a ready-made starting point for an offensive roster, we'll say.
Yeah, yeah, they do. They could do worse. I would love to see Brian Flores go down there, but there's no way that they would ever let Flores come down to the Saints, and I'm not sure he would even want to go down there. I think he'd stay up in Minnesota.
Yeah, it certainly seems like Flores or Minnesota's getting to keep Flores for at least another year. So good on them. I know they're going to be excited about that. All right, let's talk about some hirings that have actually happened. The Las Vegas Raiders hire Pete Carroll to be their head coach. They also get John Spytek from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be their general manager. Only coordinator interviews they've done so far are Darrell Bevell, who was the OC with Seattle under Carroll for a little bit once upon a time. He's currently in Miami. Seems like that's probably going to happen. Feels like Gus Bradley's going to be back DCing once again. He's not out for long. You can't keep him away. But Pete Carroll going to the Raiders, Ben, how do you feel about this?
I love Carroll. The age doesn't bother me at all. I love the energy. He hasn't forgotten how to coach. He still knows how to coach. They'll be fine in terms of head coaching type stuff. I do worry about the coordinators he's going to bring through. I'm not sure that they're top grade because a lot of the top grade coordinators have already been snatched up, right? But even when in his latter days in Seattle, I wasn't thrilled with the coordinators he was bringing through as a whole, right? So that worries me. But then the bigger problem is still the roster. You know, even if all 32 teams made good head coaching hires, not everybody's going to win. So if over the next 2 to 3 seasons, Carroll can just at least get them back up to competitive, it may not even be a playoff spot. If it's just competitive and fun, and hey, here we go, the energy's great. We are now stable versus unstable. That's a win for the Raiders.
And really, what you're getting an adult in the room. You're getting organizational stability. I mean, think about you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? You're not winning anything in the next X number of years. But what you're doing is you're think of this like an expansion team, right? They just got to Vegas a couple of years ago. They don't have a franchise quarterback. You're starting at ground zero. And so if your main football decision makers that you're starting with in what's essentially going to be year one is Tom Brady as part owner, but really what it is he's the president. He's running football. John Spytek, who was with the Bucks for a long time, he talked about a stability team, right? He's been in that front office as a change hands with coaches and quarterbacks, and they've just been good for years now. And Pete Carroll, those three guys are setting your football foundation. Then whoever's the coach after that, whoever's the quarterback after that, if Spytek is there for a long time, and by the way, not only was he in Tampa with Tom Brady, he was at Michigan with Tom Brady. They were teammates in college. So like if Spytek is there for the long haul and Pete Carroll's setting your foundation for your roster and your culture, that's almost more important than what actually happens on the field in the next 3, 4 years. But by the way, yeah, I think that raises the floor there too. I don't think you're gonna get the 3, 4 win Raiders anymore. I think you're gonna get a feisty 6 to 7 to 8 win team and battling with those other teams in the AFC West. Like they're just gonna be fun, like you said, and this is just stability and I think organizational culture building for the Raiders first and foremost.
And I think it's important considering how bad they've been since that last Super Bowl appearance, and they weren't great in the late '90s either. Let's just let's keep a guy for a few years. Let's build something, even if it's not great. Even if we know Mahomes is in the division, let's build something stable and fun, and at least get to that level and stay there.
Yeah, firing coaches is all too familiar for the Raiders going back for a long, long time now, every 2, 3, 4 seasons. So hopefully, Carroll might take himself out of the running before that, but hope
Right.
just a sense of stability. I don't think firing Pete Carroll is going to happen necessarily. Breaking news, everybody. Through the power of technology and magic, Ben and I are coming to you from the future because I'm editing this part into the middle of the podcast where we're talking about the Raiders. And the Las Vegas Raiders are keeping Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator, Ben. So Pete Carroll gets Patrick Graham in for Graham's like third or fourth head coach with the Raiders, but the guy does a great job every single year. He was getting some head coach looks this year. We were talking about him at some point during this episode about maybe being the DC for the Jags, and not sure how he was going to feel about that. But Pete Carroll taps Graham back to go with the Raiders. How do you feel about this?
I love it. I love how aggressive he is with it. And I personally think he's gotten way more out of this defense than
Oh yeah,
people would have. So I'm not even totally sure that he kind of is a fully developed defensive coordinator. To be honest, I don't think he's knows what he wants to be when he grows up yet. If you want to put it
yeah.
that. But I love the aggressiveness, and I love that he gets way more out of what should have been gotten out of the roster he's been handed to work with. To me, I don't think there's any question about it.
It's kind of like what Aaron Glenn was having to do in Detroit, right? Like he's always just like covering holes, right? He's the
Yeah,
captain of the ship that has to like put a finger or a toe in all these leaks. And at some point when all the leaks are gone, he gets to just steer the boat and decide what direction to go in. Like who knows what's gonna. Yeah,
yeah,
I like this, and this is good for Pete Carroll too because I joke about Gus Bradley. Carroll tried like three other DCs at the end of his tenure with the Seahawks, right? He was like, okay, this isn't working. I'm gonna give up coordinator and play calling and identity. I'm going to let other DCs try this. And he just never found that right fit. He never found that right guy. So for Patrick Graham, a proven guy who's done it with this team, with this roster to get to stay now, I think is huge for Carroll. It's a huge relief off of his shoulders. And it's great for the roster because the roster loves him. So the roster is going to love Carroll and they love Pete. They love Patrick Graham. This is great. This is great from an on-field production standpoint and from a vibe standpoint. I love the Raiders, man. I can't quit them. I
I,
can't quit them. This is great. I tweeted this and I couldn't tweet it in a very good way. So Tom Brady owns the team, the Tuck Rule team, right? He hires the coach that he beats in the Super Bowl. 2026, Archie Manning. He's gonna get the nephew of his little brother nemesis that he beat every year in the playoffs. Just a big Tom Brady FU to all the guys that he squashed in his NFL career. All right, anyways, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Another hiring here, Liam Cohen to the Jaguars. We briefly mentioned this. So Cohen does. Everyone knows the story by now. Cohen does the interview, doesn't want to do a second interview. Agrees to the big deal to be the highest paid coordinator with the Bucks to stay there. Balky gets fired. The Jags fly him back out. It's a whole secret thing. Might be a family kid illness thing, so we won't really touch that. Um, Cohen gets to pick the GM essentially now. They haven't made a move there, but Liam Cohen is the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. All craziness aside, so that's been talked about. How do you feel about Cohen being the head coach for the Jags?
I like it. He was one of the, and listen, I don't think he had a whole bunch of interviews necessarily, but he was one of the names that people were fairly excited about. Hey, this guy looks like he. So for the Jaguars to get him and to leverage Balky out, I think that's a win-win for Jacksonville. There's no guarantees with Liam Cohen. Obviously, he's first timer here and hasn't even done the coordinating thing for a super long time. But still, I like this a lot. All the craziness aside, I don't, man, we could spend 30 minutes just on that. But I like the final result here.
He's got a couple Rams guys interviewing for the coordinator jobs. Nate Skillhouse is a Rams offensive assistant. He interviewed for OC. And Aubrey Pleasant, Rams defensive pass game coordinator and DB's coach, interviewed for DC along with Patrick Graham. And, that's the whole thing, too. Patrick Graham, who was supposed to be interviewing for head coaching position there, ends up doing a second interview as a DC candidate. But we'll see how he fills out the rest of the coaching staff. Getting Balky out is maybe just as big a win as getting Cohen in. It's
Right.
unfortunate that you don't do that early enough to get Ben Johnson in the building. But Cohen or Joe Brady were like that second tier offensive guy that you wanted to get in for Lawrence. So they get it
Yep.
was a whole lot of craziness, whole lot of drama. it's like I've been saying about the Jags for 2 years. They fall bass backwards into good results, right? So just another one here. It took too long to move on from Bulky, but they end up getting Cohen regardless. So good on them. We'll see how he builds out the staff and what happens moving forward. Talk about bass backwards. The Dallas Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer. Long time. Everyone just thought he was a coordinator. That's just Brian, as Jerry Jones would say. Um, The Cowboys interviewed four people for their head coaching job: Leslie Frazier, Robert Saleh, Kellen Moore, and Brian Schottenheimer. That was it. Schottenheimer's their guy. They've already also named like many of their coordinators, which is hilarious because these other coaches haven't done it already and that have been hired longer. And that's just because they don't really care, man. They're just throwing stuff at the wall. They're interview. They have Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator. They're interviewing. They requested an interview with Falcons tight end coach Kevin Koger as OC, but they've hired a special teams coordinator, a couple positional coaches. They're just moving on with things. So, what do you think about Brian Schottenheimer for Dallas?
I'm really more curious to hear your legit opinion on Brian Schottenheimer because by far and wide, the take has been nobody was interested in this guy. He'll suck. But the Cowboys have a decent roster, so they won't completely suck. They'll still compete. So I'll get your opinion on him in a second. But just on the Cowboys in general, right? I mean, they're fishing in different holes than everybody else. And we all know it. Part of that's by choice. Part of that is because people don't want to come there. They're just fishing in different holes. I would say they're playing chess or checkers while everybody else is playing, but the Cowboys just have all the board games spilled out on the floor, and they're just picking up pieces and making it up as they go. They do it different. They don't suck. They make a lot of money. It's a big brand. But man, it's got to suck to be a Cowboys fan, right? I mean, you just expect this.
People for years have been not directly trying to tell me, but trying to tell me like the Cowboys just are who they are. They just want the attention. And I'm like, there's no way, man. Jerry Jones loves this. He wants to win Super Bowls. Like he needs one. He wants one before he goes, right?
Yeah,
Nah, man. I'm out. They don't care about any of that anymore, man. They just want to have a good time. They just want to let the good times roll. They want to own the Cowboys and be in the NFL and whatever. The joke is like that Jerry Jones just too old to like meet new people. Right. So Schottenheimer family is big in the NFL for years, and Brian's just been in the building. He's like, you know what, man, you can do it. And listen, in terms of what I think will actually happen, I still think they're gonna have a good offense. Like Schottenheimer, uh, no, he hasn't traditionally put the best offenses out there in his time as an OC or as a play caller. Wasn't even the play caller under McCarthy, but and Jerry Jones was like, he's gonna be the play caller. Like for him to also seemingly make that decision for Schottenheimer is kind of like, what, man, you don't want to shell out for an OC that can be the play caller? Is that also what's going on here? Just trying to save some money. Um, so the process is a joke. In terms of Schottenheimer, Dak apparently stuck up for him, which is, I guess, a good thing. I'm sure they'll still have a good offense as long as those guys are healthy. But yeah, I'm not expecting much. Especially not expecting any more than McCarthy or much different than McCarthy. Might even
yeah.
be a couple wins shy of what McCarthy could do. But I'm not looking for anything exciting here for Dallas. So yeah, man, Dallas fans, you got to know. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just Eberflus might do something cool with the defense. It'll be
Yeah,
pretty basic, but
yeah.
they were a pretty good defense here towards the end of the season, so I'm sure that'll be fine. But you're getting what you're getting in Dallas, and I know a little bit about that as you can see behind me. So nothing else interesting there. Let's go on to the Jets. Reaching back a bit further, we're not breaking any news here. We just haven't talked since then. But the Jets do get their man who we were connecting this whole time. Aaron Glenn is going to be the head coach. He's also bringing in Steve Wilkes to be his defensive coordinator. That was just officially announced today, so that's exciting. What do you think about this move for the Jets?
Okay, so I like it. I like that they hired Aaron Glenn. You talk about adults in the room. I think that's really the grand thing here. The defense should be right back up to top five. We'll see if they're number one, but they should be a top five defense with Steve Wilkes in the building. Uh, I, I really like him as DC. I don't love him. I don't put him in the elite category, but he's very good to me. So you kind of got an all-star cast of defensive coaches here, along with the tremendous defensive roster. And if they do what you suggested and maybe grab a defensive tackle in the draft high up, forget about it. I mean, They might be the first team in history to only give up 10 points a game, but finish 2-15. I mean, goodness gracious. I don't know what they're going to do on the other side of the football. We'll see. But on defense, I love it. It's a great starting point. It feels stable, at least for new directions. So I like what they're doing on that.
Let me see. What's he looking at for OC? I don't think they've made a movie yet. I'm gonna try to get that pulled up while we're talking. But yeah, I mean we said it. We wanted a defensive minded guy. We wanted a guy who felt like he could survive in the New York media, right? And he's obviously been a Jet. Not gonna get that pulled up now, but uh yeah, we'll see what they do on the offense side. But I think it's a year to rebuild the defense first, get to the offense later. And we'll see. And yeah, for Steve Wilkes, like I think it's also Aaron Glenn being a first time head coach. You get a guy that's been a head coach before. You get a guy that's been in the league for a long time. You get a guy who has managed and called a defense before. So Glenn, I think, has said he doesn't want to call defense as the head coach. He wants to focus on the head coach task. So I'm sure those guys will get together and put the right defensive game plan and roster and identity together, and then he can trust Wilkes with that and focus on the rest of it and coaching up the rest of the team. Um, let's get to some coordinator hires now, and just bop around the rest of the NFL. Patriots are filling out their staff, a mix of confirmed but also reported moves. Josh McDaniels back in New England as the OC yet again. Terrell Williams, defensive line coach from the Lions, coming over to be DC. Thomas Brown, we were wondering what he was going to end up and do. Looks like tight ends coach, maybe passing game coordinator for the Patriots. So kind of back to his old role. Doug Marrone, former head coach, O-line coach, looking like he might be the O-line coach for the Patriots. What do you think about the staff Mike Vrabel's putting together?
I like it. I wish Thomas Brown had gotten a better position somewhere in the NFL than what he's got, but he'll be fine. He'll work his way back into something good. I do like Josh McDaniels as OC. I don't have him as one of the elite guys, not up there with say, well, I won't call names tonight, but I don't have him up there in the elite. But he'll put together a good offense. He always does. I don't want him anywhere near my head coaching spot. But for offensive coordinator, he's done it for a long time. He'll do a good job with that. So Vrabel needed that. Now, is it a little bit funny that now that Papa Belichick is gone, all the grown up kids are coming back and running the organization? Yes, that is hilarious. All right. But Vrabel's a good guy. He's needed a quarterback. He's got that. He needs an OC. He's got that. So I really like what Vrabel's doing here with the Patriots.
Yeah, we were wondering, how diverse and how interesting his coaching staff would be, especially on the offensive side. And, it's not that diverse or interesting in McDaniels, but it's definitely it's a floor raiser. I mean, we've seen what McDaniels can do coaching offense, and even in the non-Tom Brady years, puts good. Mac Jones went to the Pro Bowl. We joke about what the Pro Bowl is, but he made Mac Jones look like an actual viable starting quarterback for a season there. So McDaniel's could put a good offense together. You get a guy in the building who knows that Vrabel doesn't have to touch it, doesn't have to worry about it. He could coach the rest of the team. Um, that should be good. Yeah, I don't see the Jets. I did get back to them in terms of who they're interviewing for OC. Thomas Brown, he did interview for some OC jobs. I know he did interview for OC with the Patriots. I believe he also did with the Saints, or not the Saints, the Seahawks. He got an interview there, so we'll see. We'll see if he gets back into the running here shortly. I'm not seeing anything on the Jets and interviewing an OC. I know they have an O-line coach, but we'll continue to monitor that. The Lions have named their OC in DC, John Morton, passing game specialist coming from Denver. So obviously there's a Sean Payton, Dan Campbell to John Morton kind of connection there. And Kelvin Shepard was their linebacker coach. He gets promoted to DC. Any thoughts or feelings there on the Lions making their coordinator moves, replacing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn?
Honestly, I don't have major thoughts on these two guys, so I'm curious on your side. But I gotta say, without trying to slam either of these two guys, it's gotta be a drop off here, right, for the Lions coaching staff. We've seen this for years at the college level when these top head coaches start to lose their offensive and defensive coordinators in the college ranks. There's a noticeable drop off in performance immediately and for years. There's got to be one here for Detroit too. Man, to lose Aaron Glenn on the defensive side and Ben Johnson on the offensive side, man, there's just got to be a drop off. And that doesn't mean they're going to be bad or miss the playoffs. But boy, that sharp edge that they've had here for 2 seasons now, I'm going to be, the energy's still going to be there in the building and the tough play. And they got good players and smart play. But boy, that XO scheme factor on both sides of the ball where they've had an edge, I just don't expect it to be there next year.
Let's see. Yeah, in terms of these guys specifically, I mean, I like tapping into the Sean Payton tree a little bit more, for Dan Campbell, and he brought Glenn over with him from the Saints. He plucked Ben Johnson back out of Miami from their time together there. I trust that he's gonna find the right guys. I'm a little surprised they didn't go straight up internal. I don't think the position coach brain drain has happened quite as much out of Denver as we expected. Um. But that's also a good thing, and like Antoine Randall is still coaching the receivers here. Mark Brunell is still going to be here coaching the quarterbacks unless Aaron Glenn were to bring him to New York or something like that. But they're able to bring a guy from the outside on the offense to replace Ben Johnson and keep the rest of their coaches, it seems like, at least for now. Um, so I don't know. I think the stability really might be there, and we'll see what John Morton, the OC, can do for a guy like Jared Goff. And for the defense to have that cohesion, to have that carryover, especially in a year when they ended up being so injured, right? So all these guys are coming back to probably the same thing, right? When they're coming off of injury, they're not working back from an injury and dealing with a whole new DC. I think it's a good situation. Should just mention as well, Bears hired their offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, who was the tight ends coach for the Broncos, 28 years old. So Ben Johnson just also gets another young, smart, up and coming tight ends coach to be his OC. We mentioned he was getting Dennis Allen in our last video. Also today, this came out. Passing game coordinator Press Taylor from Jacksonville, who was previously with Philadelphia under oh gosh, who was Jacksonville's coach just now that got fired? Uh,
We've already forgot him. Yeah,
he's
he's
gone. He's gone.
Pete,
Oh
Pete,
my God, this is gonna kill me.
Doug Peters.
Thank you. Yeah, the whole who's calling the plays here? Press Taylor or Doug Peterson? Why is Press Taylor calling plays? I don't think he's calling plays, but he's being added to that Bears roster as well. So Sean Payton Tree just getting tapped because Declan Doyle was with him in Denver, and now John Morton going to Detroit as well. So Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell, they know where to go. They know where to go to get some uh, offensive minded coaches. Just kind of quickly scrolling around, Ben. I don't think there's any other major hirings or interviews. We'll see who else gets interviewed for some of these coordinator jobs. Um, I'm doing another quick glance. In terms of firings, only one real big shakeup looks like it's coming from a coordinator position at this point, and that's the Texans fired offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. They also fired their offensive line coach. So D'Amico Ryans there as the head coach is trying to fix that offense that even in Stroud's great rookie season was just average in a lot of metrics, and then they were a bottom 10 group, especially in run game and pass protection type stuff. So Texans firing Bobby Slowick. How do you feel about that one?
I was okay with it. It's disappointing for Houston. They were one of the fun energy teams a year ago, right? They were just like Detroit and Washington this year. So it's disappointing for everybody to see a team kind of looks like they're about to take off and then just kind of flatline a little bit. They had a good season, but it is disappointing, but not unexpected. So I hope they can get a little bit more creative guy in there. Again, a lot of those guys have already been snatched up this particular off season, but we'll see.
Seattle hired Clint Kubiak to be their offensive coordinator after moving on from Ryan Grubb after a year. That should be interesting. We saw what he did early in the Saints season, obviously, when their offensive line was healthy. The Seattle Seahawks need to figure out their offensive line, I think, to make that work. But get a Kubiak in there, get a guy who has some good play calling experience and has shown some stuff as a play caller, but obviously spent time with Shanahan as well in San Francisco. So we'll see how that works. Tampa Bay. We mentioned Tampa Bay just being a really well-run organization, right? Cohen gets hired away just a couple days ago and all that mismatch. They've already had 6 interviews completed for their OC position. In 2 days, they interviewed more guys for their offensive coordinator than the Cowboys did for their head coach job in 2 weeks. So they've interviewed Marcus Brady from the Chargers, John Grizzard from who was their passing game coordinator, Dave Ragone, the Rams QB coach, Nate Schilhaas, who was the same offensive assistant that's interviewing with the Jaguars, and Grant Udinsky from the Vikings. And then my guy, who I talked about a lot when we did this last year, Nick Caley, Rams tight end coach, passing game coordinator. He's worked with the Patriots. He's worked with the Rams. Um, Bucks already have several guys that they're interviewing for OC. What do you think about any of those other moves that or interviews?
I like your recommendation, Kaylee, but I will say you talk about Todd Bowles, a guy who twice now has had to pull in Dave Canales, lost him, pull in Liam Cohen, lost him. So he seems to have a knack here. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't pull out a third guy here.
Shout out Todd Bowles. Shout out to the Bucks. Shout out to you, Ben. Shout out to Box Score Network. That is going to do it for our Coaching Carousel series, right? This was really what we did 3 parts, I think, this year.
Good.
So that was a ton of fun. If you've watched this video, if you watch all of these, thank you so much. Make sure you're staying with us. So subscribe to this channel. We're gonna got a couple more weekly preview shows for you for the NFL season. We will be previewing the Super Bowl over the next 2 weeks, so make sure you're subscribed so you can see that. Make sure you're following on Twitter at B Score Network. Make sure you're checking out all the pods associated with the network. Ben and I also just wrapped up a first round mock and Senior Bowl talk with Peyton Davila on the Simon and Friends podcast. And yeah, be on the lookout for more content coming your way. So for Ben, for me, for Box Score, thank you all so much. We will talk to you soon.